Hi guys, and today I've got a very special video for us. I wanted to make this video for a long time. People have requested it many times. And so this is going to be a video about all the Spanish resources that I use, or not the Spanish resources that I used, the ones that I think are the best in my opinion, the ones that I think that were worth my time and that I think would be worth your time. So I thought long and hard on how I could make this video as organized and informative as possible. And here's the formula that I came up with. First, I'm gonna go through some rapid fire tips, and I have like 10 of them. I have 8 of them. And next I'm gonna talk about the essential apps and programs that I use, the ones that I consider that were the core of my studies. And next I'll talk about the DELE exam. I took the B2 exam and I've made a video on that before, so I'll just really quickly give you the resources. And next I'll talk about some supporting apps. And then after that, I'll talk about my favorite Spanish media. It's gonna be about YouTubers, Netflix shows, music, podcasts, that kind of stuff. And at the end, I'm gonna give some Christian related resources. And that's gonna be a very specific niche of people, but I just wanted to include it because I've never seen anybody talk about that before on YouTube. And so if you're not interested, just end the video there. That's why it's at the end. And I'm gonna put timestamps for everything, so just skip around if you're interested in just one thing. And so let's start. First, I'm gonna talk about some rapid fire quick tips. The first one is to choose an accent or a region of Spanish that you want to focus on. You will thank yourself later. It'll make your life easier. Personally, I did Mexican Spanish because I had a Mexican friend, and I think you should just choose a place that you're most interested in, or geographically you're the closest to, or if you have a friend. But I am Team Latin America through and through because I do not want to learn how to conjugate vosotros. Tip number 2 is that speaking practice is the most important thing. Period. The next tip is don't rely on just one resource or just taking a certain type of class. Try and surround yourself with Spanish as much as possible. Consume Spanish media, use different types of resources. And the next tip is turn your phone into Spanish. If you haven't done it yet, do it right now. And number 5 is that don't stick to a TV show or a movie or a podcast or whatever just because it's popular. Or don't consume media for children just for the sake of learning. If you don't genuinely find it interesting, then it's just gonna be demotivating. So look for content that you actually enjoy. Tip number 6 is to watch shows and movies with Spanish subtitles. And tip number 7 is don't use too many apps. Be minimalistic about it. Otherwise, I always found it to be just overwhelming and not really helpful. And the last tip is that I personally did not take any notes. I didn't have a Spanish notebook for the entire year of learning Spanish, because I feel like you gotta carry that information in your brain anyway, and you're not gonna have that notebook when you're actually talking to a real human. So, and I don't know if that works for everybody, but personally for me, it did. Next, we're gonna go on to the essential apps. Here, I'm gonna talk about the programs that served as the core of my studies. And I'm gonna talk about 6 apps. 5 apps. I'm gonna talk about 5 different resources. First one is italki, next one is language transfer, then Anki, Pimsleur, and Asmil. And we're gonna go through each one. First one is italki, and I am so happy to announce that this video is actually sponsored by italki. If you're a longtime subscriber, you would know that I've always used italki. So basically, italki is a platform that connects you with professional teachers and native speakers to do one-on-one online lessons in more than 150 languages. 150 languages. And you can take lessons at your own pace without worrying about a fixed schedule. And signing up is completely free. There's no subscription fee or anything. So really, you just pay for the lessons that you take. I love italki so much because you can learn a language through making real connections. It is honestly amazing when you find a teacher who you get along really well with. And I always have really interesting conversations with my own teachers. And I genuinely look forward to my lessons. Some of the functions that I love about italki is how you can filter it with the country the teacher is from and also the language that they can speak. If you want to know more about a certain country, or if you want to practice listening to a specific accent, then you can look for teachers who are from that region. And the learning methods are really diverse as well. Different teachers have different ways of teaching. They have their own materials and quizzes, but it's so flexible, and the teacher would always tailor it to what best suits you. So for example, I usually prefer just doing conversation lessons without any kind of materials and just having a normal conversation. But sometimes I'd ask them to teach me a certain grammar point if I didn't really understand it. And before the DELE exam, it was great because I would send photos of my textbook to my teachers, and they would help me practice for the interview, like the speaking bit. So you can do that kind of stuff as well. And if you want to see what it's actually actually like to take classes, then a long time ago, I made a video when I first started taking italki lessons, and I recorded myself taking about 8 or 9 lessons, I think, in the course of like 2 weeks. And so I think that video would give you a more realistic look on the italki experience. So check that out if you like. And so I know that this video is sponsored, and I do have to say good things about italki, but genuinely, italki helped me so much to develop my speaking skills in Spanish. So if you've never tried it, please go check the link in the description and go sign up for free. So I hope you guys do that. So yeah, that was the first essential platform that I use. And the next one that I want to talk about is a audio grammar course called Language Transfer. I've made a dedicated video about them a long time ago as well, but I cannot recommend this course enough. This is what drilled in all the Spanish grammar that I know. And if you want to hear more in detail, then go check the video that I made a long time ago. But I recommend this program specifically to people who hate grammar. I personally always found grammar to be so boring, and I couldn't remember all the terms. And yeah, I just didn't like grammar. But what I love about him is that he never uses grammatical terms. He would never use words like past participle, subjunctive, like imperfect tense or whatever. For Spanish grammar, he would always say, okay, this is the dot past and this is the line past. The subjunctive he calls the mood tense because it changes the mood. And so that helped me so much to actually understand the grammar, and I cannot recommend this enough. And the next app I want to talk about is Anki. Now this is pretty famous, but Anki is a vocabulary flashcard thing, and it uses the space repetition method, and I think a lot of people do use it. So I just want to give a tip that I have if you're using Anki or some kind of different alternative thing. But my tip is that for the words you know that you're gonna struggle to remember, write down the context of where you learned it, or make up a sentence, and don't be generic, make it personal. I would literally always make up sentences with people I know in real life, or literally like fictional characters from a TV show or like a book that I'm into at the time. For example, I remember that I had a hard time remembering the word acera, which means sidewalk. And so to remember it, I wrote down Lidia se cayó en la acera, which would make no sense to anybody, but to me, that sentence is referring to a very specific scene in a TV show called Las Chicas del Cable, which I was really in at the time. And there's this really dramatic scene where Lidia, this character, faints at the sidewalk. And it's a really dramatic scene because she realizes that she's pregnant. And I have that specific scene in my mind as I see that word acera. You know, personalize it. That's more fun, and it will help you remember words way more than just using typical textbook names like Juan and Maria did whatever, you know. And the next essential resource that I want to talk about is Pimsleur. Pimsleur is an audio course as well, and I used it for the first 2 months, and I did the first and second level of it, and then I moved on to the next textbook. But I think Pimsleur is great when you're an absolute beginner with a language, especially because it's an audio course and it really helps you understand the real pronunciation, the correct pronunciation, and you get to practice that from the get-go. And so when I did the 2 levels of Pimsleur, then I moved on to a textbook called Asimil. Asimil is a good textbook, I think, and I would recommend it, but also I don't think which textbook you use is that important. I think the important thing is to just stick through with one textbook. But for Asimil, I guess the good thing about it is that you can do shadowing. There's a dialogue and there's an audio for it. So I did practice shadowing, but I don't necessarily think that that was a thing that helped my pronunciation because it was Spain Spanish anyway, and I was doing Mexican. So I don't really know if shadowing actually works because I don't think I developed my pronunciation through that. I guess I'll talk about pronunciation a little bit because a lot of people do ask me how to get better pronunciation, but I cannot really speak on that because I really have to credit my Japanese on why my Spanish pronunciation is pretty good, because the Japanese pronunciation is pretty similar to Spanish. 今日本語喋ってるんですけれども、特にラリルレロとかその辺の発音がやっぱりスペイン語と似ているので、努力というよりはたまたまラッキーだったっていう感じです。So if you want actual tips on pronunciation, then I would recommend a channel called Bilingue Vlogs. And I know that he has a couple videos on pronunciation, so if you want actual tips and advice on pronunciation, then I would recommend to go to his channel because I really just can't speak on it. And next, I want to move on to the resources I used for the DELE exam. Now, I made a whole video about it before, so I'm not going to talk about it a lot, but basically, I used a textbook called Edelsa DELE B2. And also for a month, I read a lot of BBC news articles. There's an app called BBC Mundo. I downloaded that and I read an article a day. And also, I listened to a lot of TED Talks. There's a lot of Spanish TED Talks on YouTube. There's podcasts. And my personal favorite TED Talks that I listened to, I wrote this down for you guys, and one is this really motivational one called something like Cambia tu mente, I think. I'll link it down in the description. And another one is one by Rafa Nadal's uncle, Tony Nadal. And that one was really interesting just because I'm a huge fan of Rafa Nadal. I used to do tennis. And next we're gonna talk about some supporting role apps. And I only got a couple on the list, and 2 of them are dictionaries. My favorite dictionaries were Reverso Context and Spanish Dict. Spanish Dict is probably the most well-organized one. I think it's the best Spanish dictionary you can find online for free. But I love Reverso Context as well because it just throws you a bunch of different meanings, and also you can type in sentences as well and it will correct you if you like spelled something wrong. But yeah, those were the dictionaries that I used. And next I want to talk about some language exchange apps, which are Tandem and HelloTalk, the ones that I've used before. And basically you can find people who are native in the language that you're learning and are learning your own language, and you find a language partner through these things. And I personally didn't use it that much just because I do not like texting. I am a horrible texter and I find texting to be very stressful. So this wasn't for me, but if you're not that type of person, then I would totally recommend it. And that was the end of the supporting apps. And now I want to talk about quickly some Spanish media, some Spanish content. And I've made dedicated videos on each of these topics before. So if you want like a bunch of different resources thrown at you, then please check out those videos. I'll put a playlist in the description. So yeah, in this video, I'll just talk about a few of my absolute favorite ones. First, I'll talk about podcasts. So for the beginner stage or for like the lower intermediate stage, I would recommend 100% the Duolingo Spanish podcast. For intermediate, my favorite was No Hay Tos. It's a Mexican Spanish podcast. And for advanced ones, my current favorites are ones called Entiende tu Mente and one called Creativo. And next, let's talk about Netflix shows. So I've got a couple down here. My favorites are Las Chicas del Cable, La Casa de las Flores, Club de Cuervos, Control Z, and La Casa de Papel are my favorites. For music, I listen to a bunch of people, but my favorite artists that I wrote down are Zetangana, Nati Peluso, Bad Bunny, Rosalia, Raúl Alejandro, Jorge Drexler, and he's not very famous, but this guy called Arad Erce has a 10 out of 10 albums. And for YouTubers, I just wrote down 3 of my favorites. One is called Dreaming Spanish. I recommend this for beginners and intermediates. And otherwise, my favorites are Letal Crisis and Iris Roig. And finally, we are finally at the end of this video, but I'm gonna talk about some Christian resources. So I used to do Bible studies every week with my Christian friends. So the Bible version that I used was one called NTV, or Nueva Traducción Viviente. And to be honest, I don't know what the difference is between each Bible versions, but my friends were using that, so I was just using that as well. And I don't listen to a whole lot of Christian music, but some worship groups that I liked were ones called Un Corazón and Majoidan. They're both Mexican, I think, and my favorite song was, and still is, a song called Tu Eres Todo y Jesús Salva by Un Corazón. And another thing that I recommend is this preacher called Andres Skipper. I always think that it's Skyper, but I think it's Skipper. He's Mexican, and I was really surprised how I could understand a good portion of his sermons. I think first of all, he's a great speaker, but second of all, how he phrases things are somehow easy to understand as a Spanish learner. I'll just link below a sermon that a friend sent me a long time ago, but yeah, if you're interested. And also I'll say this just in case, but don't ever replace your current devotions or time with God with these Spanish resources. Don't make your devotions about learning Spanish. I think it goes without saying, but yeah, if you're interested in some Christian related resources, I just wanted to provide you with some ideas. So I've been recording for an hour. We're finally done. And that was all the resources that I wanted to talk about. If you've watched this till the end, I appreciate that so much. Thank you so much. And I hope that you have a great day or great night wherever you are. And I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye-bye.